It's time for the SpartanMag.com VCast. Jim Comparoni, Paul Konyndyk, Spartan Stadium. It's Tuesday, prep week. Michigan State taking on Wisconsin today. We had Courtney Hawkins out here, and also Peyton Thorne came out and spoke today. Thorne trying to keep everybody focused. That's all he can do right now, Paul. Michigan State's 2-4, and you readjust your goals on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis. If you can beat Wisconsin, get to 3-4, get to a bye week, and let everybody pick Michigan, that's where this team needs to get to right now. Tunnel vision right now. You have to tighten a lot of screws to get there. Trying to get things done on defense, reshuffle things at safety. Had Mangum last week. I doubt he's going to play this week. Justin White came out today. He's brand new to the position, back there trying to make calls, doing the best he can. They have a lot of obstacles to overcome. A Wisconsin team that's feeling good about themselves now. Coaching change, blew out Northwestern. It's a big game here. I don't know if everyone agrees, but in my opinion, big game Saturday.
I mean, for Michigan State, it's a must-win game. I know that's cliche, but we've said that in the past in a few games. This is definitely one of those games. If you don't win this game for your Michigan State, there's no chance of getting people eligible. I think it's a long shot anyways right now, given the circumstances. But Michigan State has to do better than they've done in the last couple of weeks. They've got to play a better game. But I think, to me, we talk about all the holes they have on defense, and the only way to overcome some of those or to deal with them is to get something going on offense, and that means first downs. And you can't have 3-and-outs because this defense, the way they're beat up with not having their full complement of interior defensive linemen, the more times you give up those 14-yard drives that end up in touchdowns, and then you have a 3-and-out, and then you've got another double-digit drive. That's just like a hammer against a rock, and eventually that rock's going to break. And for Michigan State's beleaguered defense to be the best version of itself it can be, they need the offense to do its part, and that. It's not just scoring points, but it's getting first downs. That's where it starts, first downs and then score points.
Sure. And, Wisconsin, I mentioned a couple weeks ago that it was the worst Wisconsin offensive line that I had seen since 1992. And they've had great offensive lines from 93 till last year. Part of that was Illinois' defensive front was better than I gave it credit for. And part of it, I watched Wisconsin against Ohio State, which is difficult to play against. Wisconsin against Northwestern looked different. It still looks like Wisconsin, not at their best, but now they're rejuvenated. Now they're playing to try to keep Leonard as their head coach. Michigan State's defense, which has been porous, going against that offensive line, somebody's going to win on that day, and Michigan State needs to turn the tide and get things going in that direction on that day against a beatable opponent. And, a few years ago, it might have been 2019, Michigan State beat Rutgers, I think, and Mark D'Antonio made the comment that it was a program win. A lot of people took that the wrong way. They thought, a program win should be when you win the Rose Bowl or beat Michigan in a certain year. No, sometimes the program comes up and helps and carries you and helps you win a game and helps you move the program forward. I don't know if this program is at that place right now, but that's what they need right now, Paul. They need a program win. It wouldn't be a win to save the program, but it can help stabilize things for a moment and show that, yes, that progress still is being made, tangible progress toward victories in a conference where it's hard to get victories. We talked about the importance of this, and Peyton Thorne needs to come back and clear his head. I know it's very difficult for him. Today he said that he is battling injuries, mainly in the mobility issue. He says there's times when he's scrambling or keeping it when he's like, I can beat this guy, but the juice just isn't there to get it done. A lot of people are injured. The quarterback of Maryland's been injured. A lot of quarterbacks are injured. But Thorne, for what it's worth, seemed bright-eyed, focused, and determined and confident and task-oriented, which is what you need him to be. And they need a good version of Peyton Thorne this weekend, and those receivers need to continue to make progress too. You talked to Courtney Hawkins a little bit. What are your thoughts about the passing game?
Well, I just feel like, for going back to Thorne, the body language piece, I think it's such an important deal. I noticed. I don't want to use the word rejuvenated, but he had a different aura about him today. He seemed like himself in terms of self-confidence, the internal swagger.
The sun came up today.
Yeah, I feel like in the past, he's been reeling. He's had to answer all these questions about what's wrong with this, what's wrong with that. He's used to the questions by now, but now it feels like he's roll up his sleeves, get back to work, and get it taken care of mode. And I think that's something that some people would say, well, why hasn't it been like that before? Well, again, it's a process. This is something he's had to deal with. He's had to deal with the disappointment of losing these 4 games. Now I think he's at the point where he's going to do something about it. But doing something about it isn't trying to do too much. You're putting everything on one person's shoulders. It's easy to do that with the quarterback. But one of the things that, you mentioned that I talked to Courtney Hawkins, and one of the things that Courtney Hawkins said is everybody on that offense, he's like, we're just not getting enough first downs. We're getting 2 or 3 good plays, and then 1 or 2 guys are messing it up. And he wasn't talking about the O-line. He's talking about, guys, being intentional, running the right routes, running at the right depth, and getting a block that they need to get, having the focus to get those blocks. Where when things aren't going right, or you do something wrong, that you don't let it carry over to the next play where you're lackadaisical. Everybody needs to be on the same page. Everybody needs to be working and motivated, and that's what I think the kind of the focus this week is stringing good plays together. And again, no one's going to be happy with that. And going back to what you said about a program type of deal, I think what people don't like is when you say it's a program this or that, they assume that you're setting the bar for the program. That's not what it is. There's nothing wrong with saying this is a program accomplishment or this is a program win. It's something that you win because of the program. It doesn't mean that you've reestablish your bar and you say this is acceptable long term. It's not. I mean, I think what all these players they're finally at a point where, yeah, they've lost 4 games in a row. Yeah, they played 4 tough teams. None of these guys are happy about it. None of these guys believe it's acceptable. But I think they're at the point where collectively there's a will to do something about it.
Yeah, and you have to hope for their sake that it remains that way. Were there some players that were taking off, shying away from collisions late in that game? On defense, not as much. I saw a couple here and there. I think they need Amir's speed to become more physical there. He's a big guy at corner. He needs to be able to take on blocks and defeat blocks. Tucker's always said the physicality of a defense is judged by the blocking of the wide receivers and the physicality of the corners. Brantley's out there throwing it in there. And they need more of that out of speed. We've seen that speed from an agility standpoint in terms of man-to-man, a little bit limited there. On some of the intermediate routes, he has trouble trailing and tracking people there. There was a 3rd and short where they went deep coming out. Ohio State did when the game was still a game, like midway through the first half. And speed on that play, did a pretty good job with some makeup speed and got his hand through the catching area, but they still caught it over his head not over his head, but the tackle was right there. Perfect pass. I think Michigan State might have blitzed on that. There were a couple times when Michigan State blitzed and did get a little pressure on him, and it was amazing the way Stroud was accurate without having his feet set. That was kind of amazing to me. Michigan State tried to blitz about 23% of the time, and he was still like 5 of 6 against blitzes. But speed, he's doing what he can, but he's not what maybe we thought he could have been when we talked about him in preseason, and that's what a lot of this is in the preseason. Were you going to say something? I'll get back to preseason if I can remember what it was.
I'm going to say he's not doing what he can. Okay, to me, you doing what you can is do everything you can with the tools that you have. He's not the corner that we thought he was going to be, that length. It really doesn't matter because he doesn't have the flexibility. But one thing he can do is be physical, use his body and be physical and help guys out. I don't see him doing that. I think he's been a real big disappointment. And limitations in the pass coverage aside, they need him to do what he can do and be physical and not check out on plays is, in my opinion, something that he can do. And if he's not willing to do that, then he needs to be out of the game.
Well, they played a lot of corners last year. They're not doing that as much this year for some reason. They're putting the people out there that they think they can have success with. Marquis Lowry's been injured. We didn't know about that, but on the telecast, they put him on the list of injured players. Chester Kimbrough had his chance at nickel, got shuffled out of the playing group. Came in at the end of that game, but they're sticking with 2 because on one hand, we as observers are calling on Michigan State to be more assignment sound collectively and see things with one brain through 11 players, which is easier to attain when you've got continuity in those players.
I get it.
So on one hand, we're calling for more assignment sound. On the other hand, I don't want to sit here and say someone else needs to be in there because the unknown's undefeated. But I hear what you're saying. I'm not
saying that necessarily someone else needs to be in there. I'm just saying that he needs to get with the program. And you talk about a program win. Program win means getting programmed to do the right thing. Yeah. And you need to, like, football is a game where you have to do whatever you can to help your teammates. And if you're taking a play off here or there because you think you're not going to be part of the play, or you're not being more physical than the player across from you, then that's something you can do to help your team. And if you're not willing to do that, then that's a problem.
Now, in the spring when we were covering this team and also in the fall, we're not allowed to watch practice much at all, just a little bit of some ball skill drills here and there. We heard about this player being good and that player being good and people being excited about Brule and Windman and Amir Speed and these guys. And we just report what they tell us because we don't see it. And that's what's difficult about covering this team. In the past, if a player had been here for 2, 3, 4 years, we knew what Darian Harris was before he got on the field finally as a starter in year 4 as a redshirt junior. And back then, when there's more depth in the program, the spring scrimmage was bigger too. It was more of a revelation of which players are coming along. Going into the Rose Bowl year, Tyler Hoover had trouble getting established. Watched him closely in the spring game, the spring of 2013, and I went back and watched him, and I'm like, he's a defensive tackle now. And I finally determined, watching the double team blocks against maybe one starter and one second stringer, I'm like, yeah, I think he can play defensive tackle this year, and wrote it that way, and he was good, even better than that. We saw it because we knew a lot about him as he developed, saw it in the spring. This year, nobody's fault, but we are reaching around in a dark room trying to figure out what's going on. Brule looked good for 1 or 2 snaps in the spring scrimmage. Spring scrimmage was 25 snaps. It was limited for obvious reasons. I thought he'd be starting at linebacker. I thought Windman would be starting at linebacker. And Brule's not been out there. I'm not saying he should. And Windman they had to move him to defensive end kind of out of necessity. He's been good there, really good at the beginning of the year. And he was okay against Ohio State. And he is still taking people on and winning collisions and giving maximum effort. And I hear he's a really good leader. But they recruited him to play linebacker because they had a need at linebacker. Their 2 primary guys, once Quavaris Crouch was out of the program for whatever reason, Brule and Windman, they recruited them to come in and be linebackers to compete with Halliday. You end up with Halliday and Van Sumeren. Halliday's okay, but there's a limitation there. We've talked about Van Sumeren, but I had no idea that it was going to be Halliday, Van Sumeren as your starting linebackers in the spring. That's just one position group that's hard to relate to the readers of what's going on at various positions. At the safety position, you and I talked about in the spring, I just kind of always assumed that they would go into the portal to get a safety. They were going into the portal to get everybody everywhere else. Didn't get one in safety. I'm like, okay, maybe they're going to move, Williams, the bigger corner, to safety, or maybe A.J. Kirk's coming along, or maybe this, or maybe that. Actually, it ended up being none of that. Henderson gets hurt. Kendall Brooks gets on the field. He ends up being pretty solid. Then, Gross, he needed to, if they were going to keep him at safety, he needed to come around and play better. That didn't quite happen. They moved him out. Then you got Mangum in there. He gets hurt. And then you end up with a 5'9" walk-on playing safety, doing the best he can. A speedy guy that made his mark as a return man in Division II. And bless his heart, he's going to give everything he can get. But asking that guy to do communication on defense, it's tough. Now, we covered the team in the spring in August. We relay what's told to us as best as we can for a team that was 11-2. And that's what we had. But as it turned out this year, then you throw some injuries in there. And also Peyton Thorne talking about he's seeing more and more too high coverage, so there's more traffic deep. Teams are playing them differently because there's no Kenneth Walker, no Jalen Naylor, and it all compounds.